This is Our View, brought to you by the people who work for you, the proud members of the Washington Federation of State Employees. Every year, the Department of Transportation takes some time to remember those employees who were injured or lost their lives while just trying to do their jobs. A recent commemoration was held with the hopes that people will start to pay attention around work zones to keep our people safe.
When you think about the fact that our employees are going out every morning to do their job, and they're stewards of our system, they're doing public work. They are there to support the people who are traveling on the road. And today we honored them and their memories because we value every day the rest of the people that are out there on the road. And it's a reminder for us. It's a celebration for us of the service they did, and it's also a way for us to remember them with their family. We had many family members here today, and they come every year. It's wonderful. Today we heard from Belle Williams, who is Sam Williams' wife. He was a maintenance worker on White Pass, was killed. And what she said was, in a blink of an eye, her life changed. But what she recognized was that many of our lives changed that day too. And it's a connection for us to our families of our workers. But for her, her life has to go on, but she never forgets. And what we try and remind ourselves and our employees is that we can't ever forget their sacrifice as well.
Sam had been killed by a motorist speeding through the work zone. He had been flagging out on Highway 12 that day around milepost 84, and the work zone was about the length of a football field. It had been a sign job, and they were almost done when a car came into the work zone. And from what I understand from people that were there, I think by the time Sam realized she wasn't stopping, and she was coming at him like a bullet. And he tried to get out of the way, but there was a slight super in the road, and so her car drifted, and she hit Sam head on. It was an errant motorist, is a nice way to put it, I guess. And she was speeding. They said she was doing about 62 to 67 miles an hour when she hit Sam. She had food on her. It had been apparent that she'd been eating. She had an open pop in the car. There was open mail on her seat. Basically, complete inattention. She was not paying attention to what she should have been doing, which is her cruise control was set, and she was reading her mail and eating while she was driving through a work zone. And we've kind of continued to move on. But that night, I mean, having to tell your children that their dad's never coming home and to explain why, it was very hard. We had and plus it was the twins' 9th birthday.
In France, workers who are undocumented are mostly employed, but are treated unfairly because they have no rights and a lot to fear from the authorities. Some are now speaking out, saying they do valuable work and they should have rights like other workers.
Locales, départementales avec les unions départementales et régionalement pour Paris avec
In France, a new strike started from a group of workers that usually never strike. We work and we don't have resident cards. Our salaries are very low. When we get sick, we can't get sick days or we can get fired, especially in the building and construction sector, where I work. To warn the public about their situation, an African meal was organized for €3. We know and they know we don't have papers. For the work we do, we should be paid the legal minimum, €1,600. But we only get €1,000. If you ask for a raise, they'll tell you to leave. Another can take your place. However, we do have contracts and payslips. France's new laws on immigration, even if you have a work contract, resident cards are very hard to get if you don't enter the country with legal means or have not renewed your visa. However, many incidents shock people during massive police control, like this woman, who witnessed one of them. One day, at the Metro Belleville, a Chinese grandfather was going to pick up his grandson from school. The police grabbed him and threw him in a van. Parents and teachers, seeing what was happening, rebelled and also got arrested. To help them with their plan, CGT Union helped them organize their strike and stands with them all along. The CGT Union started these actions 3 years ago with 3 different companies. Now we have 14 companies all on strike at the same time. We organized the strike 4 months before, then keeping it a secret so police and management would not know about it. We decided there should only be one demand, legalizing them as workers. We could have asked for more, like better wages, better working conditions. But management would have tried to stop the action if we asked for more. So we only demand papers for these workers. The Minister of Immigration, Brice Hortefeux, has an objective of deporting over 28,000 people a year. That makes several people concerned by this problem. Benjamin Marcus for Our View, Paris, France.
Business and governments in Europe are talking a lot these days about reform. A recent OECD conference on structural reform in Europe outlines some new directions for European economies. However, reform has many meanings, and not all of them are good for workers.
Much of what we heard this morning was not particularly good or encouraging. We're hearing much of the same things, that people have to work harder and longer and have fewer social benefits and fewer protections, and that we should let the market do its job without having the adequate social safety net that's needed to cover people. It's actually not even in the interest of the people who are proposing these various, quote, solutions, because they're not solutions. They're there to help business, but for the average ordinary working person, it's going to be to their detriment. It's consumers and people who work for a living who are going to be buying the various products, and they're not going to be having the disposable income to do so if we follow through on these plans. Well, part of the problem is that we're hearing that there needs to be regulation, but the regulation is only one-sided. There's regulation on wages for workers. They're looking for more flexibility from workforces, yet they're unwilling to regulate executive pay, which is going out of sight. The same problems that we've seen in the U.S. with Enron has been happening in Europe as well. And they should be looking to do some regulation on those salaries. They should be looking to do transparency regulation on the financial equity world and much more. It has an awful lot to do with the United States and the discussion on structural reform in Europe. The European social model is one of the strongest models of both economic and social protection globally. The Europeans here should be, and globally, should beware the American model, because the last thing in the world we want to do is export our economic model over to Europe. If anything, the trade union movement in the United States, working in close cooperation with the ETUC and the ITUC and the movement globally, wants to reinforce the need to maintain and strengthen the European social model.
We need some stability to get some sense back into the world with a set of financial markets which seem to have gone completely nuts. If it's a question of, well, we just have to get more wage flexibility, i.e. downwards, I think that's exactly what you've had for the last 15 years. Wage shares have fallen in 17 out of the OECD countries. Income inequality has also increased in roughly the same number of countries. We've seen top pay sort of completely disconnect itself from any measurement of productivity. And so certainly in my constituency, I'd say, but in the public mind more generally, the key issue is how do we get structural reforms which actually produce some fairness and economic efficiency back into the system.
A look at our union history. Here's Ross Reeder.
It's June 8, 1917. 150 miners were killed today in the Granite Mountain Mine at Butte, Montana. The disaster was the result of a lack of safety devices in the mine. Investigation showed it not to be an accident, but criminal negligence. On June 11, 3 days after the catastrophe, one group of miners struck, and within 3 months, all the miners in Butte were out. In addition to better safety conditions, the miners demanded a wage increase from $4.75 to $6 per day, and also the unconditional abolition of the infamous rustling card system of blacklisting. Today, June 10, 1916, the maritime workers of the entire Pacific coast ended a completely successful strike of 2 weeks. 1,400 men in Seattle alone participated in the walkout. Higher wages and a 9-hour day in place of the old 10-hour day were the demands gained in the strike. Yesterday, June 14, 1918, the State Grange Convention was expelled from the Walla Walla School where it was holding this meeting. 30 minutes notice was all that was given. The Grangers were charged with being unpatriotic and members of the Nonpartisan League. The above information came from the June 1936 Voice of Action calendar page published by the Communist Party in their magazine, Voice of Action. I suspect that to many of our viewers, some explanation is in order. The Washington State Grange was essentially a farmers' union. It still exists, but according, at least to me, in a far more conservative suit of armor. The Nonpartisan League, now there's our real history. A lot of it came from the Dakotas and Minnesota. It has been recorded well on film and on paper. It would be an interesting research project for your children's History Day projects.
This has been Our View, brought to you by the Workers of Washington, members of the Washington Federation of State Employees, where we remind you, when you earn a paycheck for your hard work, you don't have to give up your rights. Thank you for watching, and please join us again.
Well, Pa, this is a break for you. I have to do the talking today. I had hoped that you were going to be the one to get stage fright. Instead of that, why, the batteries didn't show up, and the joke's on me. Here's Grandma Stewart making out the check for the new present, $1,000. This is Grandma Stewart's birthday, but she's making a check out to me. Her birthday present to me. Here's Aunt Sadie Curtis making out the check for the auto gyro, $500. I'll bet it's a rubber one, watch it bounce. Here's Grandma Barnes, just had her 50th wedding anniversary. In just a minute, we're going to show you Grandpa. He got a medal. Here's Grandpa Barnes. He's the fellow that got the medal for being married 50 years.